соответствии со статьей 51 части.
There is some imperial-minded surrounding in his minds which led to this aggression. Pushing propaganda 24 hours a day, 8 years, every day, your dinner with this propaganda on the background. And then it's a war, it seems just logical. Don't corner Putin, don't make him like completely desperate and so on. And Putin himself probably understands that he might lose China as a supporter if he used the nuclear tactical weapon.
สวัสดีครับในโอกาสครบรอบ1 ปีสงครามยูเครนที่เกิดขึ้นจากการรุกรานของรัสเซียโอเอไทยที่ติดตามรายงานสถานการณ์มาโดยตลอดวันนี้ได้เชิญผู้สื่อข่าวภาคภาษารัสเซียที่ติดตามประเด็นนี้มาตลอดเช่นกันมาพูดคุยแล้วก็แบ่งปันข้อมูลต่างๆที่หลายคนอาจจะไม่เคยได้ยินมาก่อนนะครับนั่งอยู่ผมวันนี้คือ Danila Galperovich International Multimedia Journalist จาก VOA ภาคภาษารัสเซียนะครับThank you for joining us today, Danila.
Thank you very much for having me.
So first, can you tell us more about yourself here at VOA and your role in the reporting of the war in Ukraine?
I'm with VOA Russian Service for 10 years. I started as a freelance reporter for VOA in Moscow, Russia. And I've been there until 2017 when Russian government labeled the VOA as a foreign agent. Yeah. And then I had to leave Russia, so I went to Washington and joined the VOA Russian Service as a reporter and, as you just mentioned, multimedia journalist. So I do texts, I do videos, I do interviews, and of course last year I mostly busy with covering Russian aggression war in Ukraine.
Right. So to your knowledge, what is the sentiment of the general public in Russia after the war has been dragging on for a year now?
We should divide the general public in Russia at least on 3 parts. Right. There are about 20 to 25% of Russian population who are indeed supporting the war because since 2014, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and fueled the war in Donbass, Russian propaganda tirelessly worked on Russian population to militarize it, to propagandize it, to make it more inclined to the war, to accept the war, especially in Ukraine. There was a language of hatred, there was a language of aggression all the time, like 8 years before. So it took a long time to prepare at least some part of Russian population to accept the war. Another part of population, they do understand the nature of Putin's regime. They do understand that it is a criminal regime, which is actually very dangerous, and they, they persecute badly all opponents. So like in Soviet times, like in the times of Soviet Union, majority of people are like hesitant to express inacceptance of the war, but they probably silently negative about this war. And I believe up to 20% are openly or almost openly against this war. And that's the part of it. Of course, the youngest, the most bright, most intellectual, probably most pro-Western part of this population already left the country.
Right. So these groups have not changed their stance at all during the past 12 months after the war began?
I think the big change was in September when Putin introduced the mobilization by his decree, because if before many people were not feeling direct threat to them to be, for example, sent to war as conscripts, as mobilized people, now all more or less young male population is under the danger of being sent to the front. So, of course, a lot of people who were thinking differently, they decided just to leave or to hide or to, I don't know, to somehow avoid their contact. And of course, it impacted Russian population seriously.
So, you knew the number of people who left?
I don't know, of course, but I know the estimates. And some people say that at least 500,000 people left Russia. And actually, it might be up to 2 million because Russians, they left for Georgia, Kazakhstan, Asian and European countries, United States as well. And you know that the United States just a little bit released the rules about accepting Russians who are fleeing the war. Yeah. But we can definitely say that at least 500,000 people, and again, brightest, most pro-Western, most pro-progress, pro-new technologies, new art, whatever, they left Russia, and many of them will not come back.
Okay. So after a year now, to your knowledge, I mean, since you're interacting more with locals, has the war affected their lives in any particular way? Something that, you know, mainstream media, even ourselves, do not have space to put in a story, but you can tell like anecdote from the ground.
First, despite that many Western media are really prohibited to work in Russia now, there are many independent internet media who are working. We can say that now it's ironically the time of when Russian independent journalism is blossoming. I mean, we have all these investigations about Putin and his cronies, about their money, about sources for the war, about everything. So, and it goes from all journalists who left Russia, but they still cover Russia. Mm-hmm. So it is about the media, about how war affected the people. First, of course, a lot of Western brands left Russia, mm-hmm. together with their jobs, together with their investments, and of course, it's very much how to say, you can actually feel it in big cities like mm-hmm. Moscow and St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. Another thing is that a lot of internet services mm-hmm. Are inaccessible and even illegal in Russia, like Facebook, yeah. Instagram, mm-hmm. Whatever Meta does, mm-hmm. it's now illegal and extremists. Of course, Western sanctions didn't fully worked yet, but I mean, it will this year, next years, because investments in like modern technologies mm-hmm. are gone from Russia, and Russia is very much relates on China now, in many ways, mm-hmm. and there are signals that China is ready mm-hmm. to supply Russia with I don't know, not exactly genuine, but probably with counterfeit brands or with some technologies, but mostly in terms of jobs, technology, brands, mm-hmm. And like interaction with the West mm-hmm. as a whole, yeah. Russia suffered badly.
Right. Back to the question, you mentioned that about 20-25% of people supported the war. Why did they support the war? I mean, the propaganda has been working for 8 years, you said, but in their minds, why do you think it was justified to have a war?
Because Russian propaganda, as I said, they made Ukrainians, for Russians, are most hated people, because there was a combination of telling people, especially of older generation, that Ukrainians are Nazis, that it is the country which is ruled by Nazis, which is absolutely ridiculous, because we know that Vladimir Zelensky, president of Ukraine, is a Jew, and also they have all this mixed of nationalities in the leadership, and it always was, say, during 8 years, it was the combined, as we usually say, hybrid war. Mm-hmm. So limiting Western or Russian independent media inside Russia, pushing propaganda 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. You cannot imagine the wave of propaganda which Russians are experiencing all the time. And you just can imagine, you come home, you have your dinner, and you switch on TV, mm-hmm. just to have like to have it working on the background. And on the background, every day, every year dinner, all these 8 years, you have Ukrainians are Nazis, they are threatening us, they took our territories, they like repressing people of Donbass and so on. Just imagine it, 8 years, every day, your dinner with this propaganda on the background. And then it's a war, it seems just logical.
But then you said the other majority of people are either in silence or against them. So these people didn't buy these propaganda efforts or anything?
For them, the area of information is kind of dim. You know, they think it's not just one single truth. There are many truths, and this is also worked out by Russian government to like inject this in the Russian public, that we will never know the truth. It's all very foggy. But Americans also are lying, and we remember Iraq, we remember Vietnam, we remember many things, and Russian propaganda is reminding about it all the time. And they say, okay, of course they never say like we in Kremlin did bad things too. No, they always say these guys are bad. So whatever they say about Russia is not right. So you cannot trust them. Trust us. And this is, and also you experience it every day. So even if you are doubtful about the situation, it's very hard to break it inside of you. And I know the stories of the families, which are like split families. Part lives in Ukraine, part lives in Russia, and relatives call to Russian part of the family and say, can you do something? They actually shelling us with rockets and everything. And the part from Russia is responding by phone, no, you're lying. Nobody is shelling, nobody is shooting on you, and so on. And usually sometimes it's mother and son, sometimes it's grandfather and granddaughter, grandson. So you should understand that the level of uncertainty is, and of course, scare, because people know that if they will express publicly they disbelieve in Russian propaganda, they might be punished, because now in Russia there are real jail terms for just a post on Facebook. So for like 2 lines with doubts about Russian army, you can have life in prison. Not life in prison, but time in prison. I mean, this is serious.
Yeah, I understand. So what does this war tell us about President Putin's thinking, ambitions, or plan?
There are mixed analysis of the reasons why did he start it. Some people just blaming his, amateurish approach to history, and that he is imperial-minded, and he always were dreaming to have great Russia and so on. I don't think this is the case, because I remember I covered Putin for several media outlets like the BBC and RFERL before the Voice of America. And I remember Putin, I traveled with Putin on his first years to Germany, to Western countries, to G8, which was G8 at that time. And at that time, Putin was quite democratic. He expressed his democratic views. He spoke in German parliament in German language, speaking about democracy, openness of Russia, and so on. I think that probably, of course, it was lie all the time, but I don't believe it. I think that he thought that the rules are not for him, that the words about democracy is just what he has to say to have Western like friendship, support, and everything. When he understood that democracy in the West means something, it's not only words, it's the separation of power, and so on, he started to get angry to the West. And at the same time, he believed that his corrupted schemes, when he distributed wealth among his friends, can lead to some disturbances in the country, and he always thought that disturbances are not appearing by itself. It's like inspired by the West. So towards this 22 years, he got more and more angry and hostile towards the West, and he needed the ideology to base his own hatred, his own greed, his own corruption on it. And of course, and he wanted to keep power first. We should remember that before aggression to Ukraine, he changed the constitution 2 years before to stay in power like forever. And it is the thing that probably dangers or, forthcoming instability inside the country pushed him towards the war situation when he can mobilize country, like separate people who are not agree, because all people he needs is just to serve the pipeline. Yeah. So I mean, it's I think there is some imperial-minded surrounding in his minds which led to this aggression, but I think there were internal reasons too.
So how has this war affected his popularity, to your knowledge? Getting more popular or less?
We cannot trust any of present opinion polls, because in the totalitarian country or almost totalitarian country, when somebody is calling you and saying, "What do you think about Mr. Putin, sir?" and you know that line is actually bugged, and not exactly bugged, but everything is recorded and then probably reported. Of course, you will say, "Oh no, I support Mr. Putin completely," and so on, just to get rid of it. We don't know the state of minds of Russian public, but I think for somebody who've been affected directly by this war, like who lost the son, who lost, and some of people who really were compassionate to Ukrainians, I think that during this war, his popularity went down, I think.
And the US has been involved in this, apparently, a lot. So, what Russians in general think of the US people?
It's the main enemy.
Oh.
Maybe together with Ukraine. That's what propaganda is saying, that we don't fight with Ukraine. We fight with the West as whole, and the United States in particular, because United States were the country which supported Ukrainian nationalism and so on, and Ukrainians, as Russian propaganda is saying, Ukrainians almost agree with the peaceful talks with us, but United States pushed them to fight further and so on. So for many Russians who support the war and who is this information fog, United States is the main enemy, instigator of all instability and everything. But it's surprisingly that many people who criticize Putin now, they see United States probably as the only force which will help Ukraine to, if not to win, then to withstand this aggression.
As a journalist covering this, what's the most challenging thing, or are the most challenging aspects?
To read every day that another part of Ukraine was shelled by Russian rockets, another pregnant woman, another senior, just peaceful population died. And of course, I think about defenders of Ukraine, Ukrainian army too. I mean, if you read every day and if you see these pictures every day, I can believe it, because many people cannot believe it that it is happening in 21st century. I can't believe it because I covered Russian war in Chechnya in the middle of 90s and the beginning of 2000s, and there were real atrocities when you cannot believe that humans are capable to do that, and now Russian army is just repeating these atrocities. But of course, when you get through when you get through your mind, your body, it's a huge stress, and I have relatives in Ukraine, so I had to persuade my own aunt to leave Donbas region to go to Kiev. So this is my personal too.
Sorry to hear that. So last question. What do you think we can expect a year from now in this war?
I have no idea because a lot of people saying don't corner Putin, don't make him like completely desperate and so on. I think for now, United States and its allies does a very good job to support Ukraine and at the same time not to provoke Putin to use, for example, nuclear arms, even tactical nuclear arms. And Putin himself probably understands that he might lose China as a supporter if he used the nuclear tactical weapon. Apart from that, I expect that this war can be long. I don't think that war will be anyhow victorious for Russia. I think that Ukraine can take back many of its territories. I doubt about Crimea because Crimea was fortified by Russia within 8 years with all means. I think Crimea will be the point when Russia might decide to do something really nasty. But I expect that Ukraine will take back a lot of territory, and I hope West will help it, and United States in particular will help it to do so.
ก็ทั้งหมดนี้นะครับคือข้อมูลที่เราได้รับฟังจากผู้สื่อข่าว VOA ภาคภาษารัสเซียที่ติดตามรายงานเรื่องนี้มาตลอด1 ปีและดูกันต่อไปนะครับว่าสถานการณ์จะเป็นอย่างไรติดตามได้จาก VOA ไทยครับขอบคุณมากครับที่ติดตามในวันนี้สวัสดีครับ